Alton Merriweather was 44 years old, and he had not slept in his own bed for 11 weeks. Not because he had been asked to leave it. No one had said that. No one had said much of anything, which, if you understand anything about how marriages unravel, is precisely the problem. He was lying on the leather couch in his home office at 1:14 in the morning, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above him, when his phone lit up with a calendar reminder he had forgotten to delete. Anniversary dinner, 7 p.m., Marcel's. Tomorrow. 14 years. He picked up the phone and stared at the notification until the screen went dark again. The reservation had been made 3 months ago, back when he still believed things would correct themselves the way a ship corrects after a wave, naturally, given enough time and stillness. He hadn't canceled it yet. He hadn't confirmed it either. And somewhere in the master bedroom down the hall, behind a door that had been closed every night since August, his wife Zora was either asleep or pretending to be. Both options felt equally far away from him. What Alton did not know, what he could not have predicted, even with the particular brand of careful observation that had defined his entire professional life, was that within 24 hours he would walk into a room at the worst possible moment, hear something that would nearly end his marriage on the spot, and then hear something else entirely that would make him sit down on a stranger's staircase and press both hands against his face like a man who has just been handed back something he believed was already gone. Before we go any further, if you have ever been the kind of person who shows love through what you do rather than what you say, and then watched in confusion as the person you love interpreted your silence as absence, this one was written for you. Stay with me. Houston in late November carries a particular quality of light. Not the hard brightness of summer. Something lower, amber-toned, the kind that makes the city look almost gentle from a distance. The live oaks along Montrose Boulevard still holding green while the rest of the country has already turned. Alton had driven that stretch of road more times than he could count. Past the galleries, the small restaurants with tables spilling onto sidewalks, the old houses with wide porches built for weather that rarely comes but always might. He was a restoration architect, had been for 18 years, the kind of work that requires you to understand how something was originally built before you can decide how to save it. He could look at a 100-year-old home and read its history in the joists, in the plasterwork, in the specific way the floors had settled over decades. He understood pressure, load, fatigue, the slow processes by which solid things develop fractures that no one notices until the damage is structural. Psychologists have a term for the phenomenon Alton was living inside: pluralistic ignorance. It describes a situation in which two people each privately reject a belief but assume the other person holds it. In a marriage, it looks like this. Both people are unhappy, both people want to fix it, and both people remain silent because each one assumes the other has already decided it is beyond repair. The silence becomes its own evidence. The absence of words is read as the presence of a verdict. Zora Merriweather was 40, a pediatric speech therapist who spent her professional life helping children find words for things they couldn't yet express. The irony of this was not lost on her, though she had never said so out loud. She was precise, perceptive, beautiful in the specific way that has nothing to do with arrangement of features and everything to do with the quality of attention a person brings to the world around them. When she listened to someone, they felt it. When she stopped listening, they felt that too. They had met at a fundraiser for a historic preservation society in the 3rd Ward 16 years ago. Alton had been giving a short talk about a shotgun house restoration project, stumbling slightly over his notes, when he caught Zora watching him from the 2nd row with an expression he would later describe as amused patience. She told him afterward that she liked his voice, not the sound of it, specifically, the way he paused before important words, as though he wanted to make sure they were the right ones. For 11 of their 14 years, that quality had been the foundation of everything between them. He chose his words carefully, and she trusted the ones he chose. The last 3 years had been different. Not the sudden rupture that people imagine when they think of marriages failing. No thrown objects, no raised voices, no dramatic confessions. Something quieter and, in its own way, more devastating. A gradual mutual withdrawal so symmetrical that neither could identify who had started it, because the truth was that they had both started it at exactly the same time, for entirely different reasons, and had each mistaken the other's retreat for confirmation of their own worst fear. 3 years ago, Zora had a miscarriage at 11 weeks, their second. The first had been early enough that they had called it a loss, but treated it privately as a setback. Painful, but recoverable. The second one broke something neither of them knew how to name. Alton had taken 3 days off work, brought her tea, sat beside her on the couch, rubbed her feet without being asked. And then, because he was a man whose instinct under duress was to return to the structures he understood, he went back to work, not because he didn't care, because he didn't know what else to do with the grief, and his drafting table had always been the place where formless things acquired shape. Zora read his return to routine as recovery, as moving on, as a signal that the chapter was closed and she should close hers too. She never told him that she cried in the shower for 4 months. He never told her that he sat in his car in the office parking lot every morning for 20 minutes before he could make himself go inside. 2 people, each grieving alone, each believing the other had already finished. What fills the space that grief vacates when no one is paying attention is distance. And distance, left long enough without examination, begins to feel like architecture. Permanent, load-bearing, something you build your days around rather than something you might dismantle. Their anniversary dinner reservation sat uncancelled in Alton's phone. He rolled onto his side on the leather couch and closed his eyes. One more day, he thought. He would know by tomorrow whether there was anything left worth trying to restore. If your spouse had been pulling away for years and you finally discovered the reason, not the reason you imagined, but the real one, would you want to hear it, even if it changed everything you thought you understood? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. The next evening, Alton came home from the office at 5:30 to find Zora in the kitchen, dressed. Not dressed up, but dressed with intention. A wine-colored blouse he hadn't seen before. Earrings. She was slicing lemon for water with a focus that suggested the lemon required her full concentration. Marlena's birthday dinner is tonight, she said without looking up. Her husband booked the private room at Uchi. We're expected at 7, not Marcel's, not their anniversary, Marlena's birthday. Alton leaned against the doorframe and felt something settle in his chest, the small, familiar weight of a hope being quietly set down. He had not mentioned the anniversary reservation. Neither had she. Whether she had forgotten or chosen not to acknowledge it, the result was the same. The date that once meant something now occupied the same space as any other Wednesday. "I'll be ready," he said. They drove to the restaurant in Alton's truck. Zora looked out the passenger window at the city scrolling past, and he glanced at her profile 3 times during the ride and said nothing each time. In behavioral psychology, this pattern is called approach avoidance conflict. The simultaneous desire to move towards something and pull away from it, producing a paralysis that looks from the outside like indifference. Uchi was crowded, warm, full of the low buzz of people performing their best selves for an audience. Marlena had invited 8 couples. The private room had floor-to-ceiling glass and a long communal table set with small plates already arriving in waves. Alton shook hands, said the right things, smiled when the situation called for it. He had become skilled at this, the mechanics of social presence without emotional participation, performing a version of himself that was technically accurate but structurally hollow, like a renovation that replaces every surface but never addresses the foundation. Zora sat 3 seats away from him, not by design, just by the physics of arrival. Someone else had taken the adjacent chair, and she had settled where there was space. But the distance registered. Everything registered now, whether he wanted it to or not. By 8 o'clock, the conversation had split into clusters. Alton was listening politely to Marlena's husband describe a golf trip when he noticed Zora's chair was empty. Her glass was still half full. Her napkin folded beside her plate. He excused himself. Down a hallway paneled in reclaimed wood, he identified it automatically. White oak, quarter sawn, probably salvaged from a warehouse demolition. Past the restrooms, toward a small lounge area near the service corridor. He heard her voice before he saw her. She was standing near a window with two women he recognized from the dinner table. Marlena and another woman whose name he couldn't recall. Zora's back was to him. She was not crying, not yet, but her voice had the particular thinness that precedes it. The sound of someone holding structure with effort alone. "I don't know how to reach him anymore," Zora said. "He comes home, he's polite, he asks about my day. And then he goes to his office and I hear him working until midnight. And I think," she paused, "I think he's already left. In his head, I think he's already gone and he's just too decent to say it." Alton stopped walking. His hand found the wall beside him. Marlena's voice, low and careful. "Have you talked to him about it, directly?" "How do you directly tell someone you think they've stopped loving you?" Zora said. "If I say it and he confirms it, then it's real. Right now, at least I can pretend it's something else, that he's just busy, that he's just tired." There is a particular kind of pain that arrives when you hear yourself described by someone who loves you and realize that the version of you they are carrying in their mind bears almost no resemblance to the version you believe yourself to be. It is the pain of understanding that your interior life, your private sacrifices, your unspoken devotion, your reasons is completely invisible to the person who matters most. Alton pressed his back against the wall. His lungs felt tight in a way that had nothing to do with breathing. "Keith told me I should consider my options," Zora continued, her voice dropping lower. "He said I'm too young to spend the rest of my life with someone who treats me like a roommate." Keith Dandridge. Alton knew the name. A real estate developer who appeared at every professional event in Houston with a different watch and the same practiced intensity. The kind of man who reads emotional distance in someone else's marriage, the way a certain type of predator reads an injured animal, not with sympathy, but with opportunity. "He keeps texting," Zora said, "telling me I deserve more, that I'm settling." "Marlena again, and what do you say?" A pause long enough for Alton's heartbeat to fill it twice. "I don't say anything, because some mornings I wake up and think maybe he's right, maybe I am settling. And then I walk past Alton's office, and I see his jacket on the back of the chair, and I see his coffee mug from the morning still on the desk, and I think about the man who used to leave me notes inside my lunch bag. Just small things, one sentence, sometimes just a word, and I can't make those two people be the same person. The man who did that, and the man who hasn't touched me in 4 months." Her voice broke on the last word. Not dramatically. The small, private fracture of someone who has been holding something precisely balanced and has finally let one edge slip. "I still love him," she said, barely above a whisper. "That's the part that makes it unbearable. I still love him, and I don't know if he knows. I don't know if it even matters to him anymore." Alton lowered himself to the floor. Right there in the hallway, back against the wall, knees drawn up. A 44-year-old man in a sport coat sitting on the floor of a restaurant corridor, like someone who has just received a diagnosis and needs a moment before he can stand. He sat there for a long time. The sounds of the restaurant moved around him. Dishes, laughter, music playing low through hidden speakers. And inside that noise, a silence that was entirely his own. He had stopped writing those notes 3 years ago. Not deliberately. The way you stop doing something when the context it belongs to shifts and no one tells you it still matters. He had assumed she knew. He had assumed the work he was doing. The late nights, the projects taken to fund the future he was building for both of them, spoke for itself. It had not spoken for itself. It had said nothing. and in the absence of his voice, she had listened to someone else's. He stood up, straightened his jacket, walked back to the table, sat down, and did not eat for the rest of the evening. When Zora returned 10 minutes later, eyes clear, composure rebuilt, she glanced at him once. He held her gaze for a full second longer than he had in months. Something flickered across her expression, confusion, maybe, or the faint recognition that something had shifted without her knowing what. They drove home in silence, Houston's skyline glowing orange and white in the rearview mirror, the truck cab quiet except for the road and the low hum of the engine, and two people breathing in the same small space, each carrying a weight the other couldn't see. When they got home, Zora walked toward the bedroom. The door, the closing, the routine of separation they had built without ever agreeing to it. Alton went to his office. He sat at his desk. He opened the bottom drawer and took out a manila folder he had placed there 6 days ago. Inside, a legal separation agreement. Not divorce papers, he hadn't been able to bring himself to go that far, but a formal document, drafted by an attorney, ready to be presented. He held it for a long time. Then he opened his desk's top drawer and took out something else, a small stack of yellow Post-it notes, the same brand he had always used. He pulled one free, picked up a pen, and wrote a single line. He walked down the hallway, set the Post-it note on the floor outside the bedroom door, where she would see it when she opened it in the morning. Then he went back to his office and sat in the dark, listening to the house settle. The note said, "I never stopped. I just went quiet. Can we talk? Stay with me." Because what happened the next morning would test everything Alton believed about patience, about pride, and about whether a man who has spent his career restoring broken structures can apply the same principle to his own home. Zora found the note at 6:12 a.m. Alton knew because he heard the bedroom door open, then a silence that lasted long enough to mean she was reading it, and then a sound he had not heard from that side of the hallway in 3 years. Not crying, exactly. A single breath, caught and released, the sound of someone encountering something they had given up expecting. She appeared in his office doorway 12 minutes later, still in her robe, hair pulled back, eyes carrying the evidence of a difficult night. She held the Post-it between two fingers like something she was afraid might dissolve if she gripped it too hard. "What does this mean?" she said. He turned his chair to face her fully. "It means I heard you last night, at the restaurant. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard you." The color left her face in stages. He watched it happen the way he watched old plaster reveal its layers under careful removal. Slowly, then all at once. "Alton, before you say anything," he said, "I need you to know something." He opened the bottom drawer and placed the separation agreement on the desk. "This has been here for 6 days. I haven't signed it. I haven't been able to. And until last night, I didn't understand why." She stared at the document, then at him, then at the Post-it note still between her fingers. "You were going to leave?" she said. "I thought you already had." The sentence landed between them with the weight of something falling from a great height. Two people, each convinced they had already been abandoned, each performing a version of moving on that was indistinguishable from the real thing. Because neither had bothered to check, she sat down in the chair across from his desk, the same chair where clients sat when he showed them renderings of their restored homes. She had never sat in it before. The formality of it, the desk between them, the separation papers visible, gave the moment the quality of a negotiation between two people who desperately wanted to be on the same side, but had forgotten how. "You stopped writing the notes," she said. "You stopped responding to them." She closed her eyes. "I responded to everyone. You just didn't see it. I kept every single one in a box in my closet, 73 of them. I counted last month when I thought it was over." Something in Alton's chest rearranged itself. The architectural equivalent of discovering that a wall you had marked for demolition was actually the one holding everything up. "I need to tell you about Keith," she said. "I heard. I need to say it to your face. He called 4 times. I answered once. He told me I was wasting my best years. He told me that loyalty to someone who doesn't see you is just another word for fear. She held Alton's gaze without flinching. I didn't agree with him. But I didn't hang up fast enough. And I need you to know that, because if we're actually doing this, I can't carry that alone. Alton took a breath. The question that came next required a particular kind of courage, the kind that has nothing to do with strength and everything to do with willingness to hear an answer you might not survive. Did any part of you believe him? I believed that I was invisible to you, she said. I didn't believe Keith was the answer, but I believed the problem was real. It was real, he said. I made it real by going quiet. We both did. They sat with that. The early morning light coming through the office window. November in Houston, low and warm, painting the room in tones that made everything look repairable. 3 weeks ago, Alton said, the city offered me the contract for the Freedmen's Town restoration. 16 historic structures. Largest project I've ever been offered. 3 years of work. She looked at him. That's your dream project. I turned it down. Silence. The scope required me to be on site 14 hours a day for the first 8 months. I would have been physically in this house and completely absent from it at the same time. I couldn't. He stopped, reworked the sentence in his head the way he reworked drawings that weren't structurally sound. I couldn't add more distance to a marriage that was already disappearing. Zora pressed her hand over her mouth. The gesture of a person absorbing something that recalibrates everything they believed to be true. You gave that up, she said, without telling me. I didn't want it to feel like a transaction, like I was buying credit. Alton, her voice broke slightly. That's not a transaction. I didn't know. How was I supposed to know if you never said it? That's the thing I'm learning, he said quietly. Doing the right thing silently is the same as not doing it, if the person who needs to see it can't. She stood up, crossed the space between them, and placed her hand on his chest. Not a hug. Something more deliberate, as though she was checking whether something she remembered was still there. I want to fix this, she said. Not go back to what it was. I want to build something we haven't built yet. Then we do it properly, he said. Therapy, real conversations. No more silence standing in for the things we're afraid to say. She nodded. He reached for the separation agreement, held it for a moment, and then fed it through the shredder beside his desk. The machine chewed through 23 pages with a steady mechanical hum, and when it was done, the room felt lighter in a way that had nothing to do with paper weight. Their first session with Dr. Anita Bowen was the following Tuesday. Her office was in a converted Victorian in Montrose. Exposed brick, tall windows, a room designed with the kind of care that Alton recognized immediately as intentional. Every element serving a purpose. Nothing decorative without also being functional. Dr. Bowen was calm in the way that certain people are calm. Not passively, but with the active, sustained effort of someone who understands that stillness in a room gives other people permission to move. She had a voice that made difficult questions sound like genuine curiosity rather than interrogation. The session went deeper than Alton expected. The miscarriages surfaced within the first 20 minutes, not as accusations, but as shared wreckage that neither had fully examined. I went back to work because I didn't know how to grieve with someone watching, Alton said. I thought if I could hold the structure, keep working, keep earning, keep the house running, then at least something would be stable. And what that communicated to Zora, Dr. Bowen said gently, was that the loss was yours to process alone, Alton's to manage, and the marriage to absorb without acknowledgement. Zora was crying now. Not the controlled, private kind. The kind that comes when something locked is finally opened in the presence of a witness. I thought he didn't care, she whispered. I thought I was the only one who was broken by it. I was broken by it, Alton said. His voice cracked for the first time. The sound was startling, even to him. A man who had trained himself to be the steadiest thing in any room, hearing his own structure give. I sat in my car every morning. For months. I couldn't walk into the office without 20 minutes alone first. And I never told you because I thought, if I fell apart too, who holds everything up? Dr. Bowen let the silence after that do its work. Two people, finally seeing the same event from both sides for the first time. Grief that isn't shared, she said, doesn't halve, it doubles. Because each person carries not only their own pain, but the isolation of carrying it alone. Over the following weeks, the conversations continued. Some were harder than others. Zora told Alton that Keith had sent one final message the week before their first session. "You're making a mistake. He'll never change." She had not responded, but she had not blocked him either. Not yet. "Why?" Alton asked. Not with accusation, with the genuine need to understand. She thought for a long time, because blocking him felt like closing a door. And for a while I wasn't sure this one, she gestured at the space between them, was going to stay open. "Is it open now?" he asked. "It's open," she said. "It's been open since the post-it note." That evening, she blocked Keith Dandridge's number while sitting beside Alton on the porch. No announcement. She simply picked up her phone, tapped the screen twice and set it down. He noticed. She knew he noticed. That was enough. Alton began writing the notes again, not because it was a strategy, because the therapy had helped him understand something fundamental about himself. He had spent his entire career making invisible things visible. The hidden structures inside walls, the unseen supports beneath floors, and had somehow failed to apply the same principle to his own marriage. The things he felt needed to be externalized, placed where they could be witnessed. "Proud of you today. The house smells good. Whatever you're making, I want seconds. I saw you laugh at the grocery store yesterday when the kid in front of us sneezed on his dad. I haven't heard that laugh in a long time. I missed it." She kept them, all of them, added to the box in the closet that now held over 80 small yellow squares of paper, each one a piece of evidence that something quiet and persistent had survived 3 years of silence. 4 months later, Alton received a call. The Freedman's Town project had stalled with the original architect. The city was calling to ask if he would reconsider. Same scope, same historic significance. But this time, with a flexible timeline. He told them he needed to discuss it with his wife. That night, sitting on the porch with the Houston skyline glowing in the distance and the oak trees moving gently overhead, he told Zora about the offer. All of it. The scope, the hours, the significance, the potential cost to their time together. "This is your life's work," she said. "You're my life's work," he replied. "This is my career. They're not the same thing." She was quiet for a moment. "Take it," she said, "but I want to be part of it. Show me the plans, walk me through the buildings. Let me understand what you see when you look at them." He looked at her in the low porch light. The woman who had kept 73 post-it notes in a shoebox, who had once told him she liked his voice, not the sound, but the way he chose his words, who had spent 3 years on the other side of a closed door, carrying a grief he had been too careful to share. "I'll bring the drawings home tomorrow," he said. She leaned into his shoulder. The pressure of it, slight, deliberate, sustained, said more than either of them could have managed in words. 2 weeks later, Alton took Zora to the Freedman's Town site. A Saturday morning, cool for Houston, the sky washed pale and clean. They walked the rows of historic structures together, shotgun houses with cypress frames older than anyone alive, porches that had held a century of conversations, walls carrying stories that most people would never hear, but that Alton could read the way other people read text. He showed her the joinery, the hand-hewn beams, the places where the original builders had solved problems with ingenuity and materials and sheer stubborn refusal to let something fall down. "This is what I mean," he said, standing inside a structure that had been standing since 1869. "This is what I mean when I say I build things to last. Not because it's easy, because it matters." She took his hand. The grip was firm, decided. The grip of someone who has weighed the alternatives and arrived. "Show me where we start," she said. He looked at her, then at the walls around them. walls that had held through floods and storms and the slow weight of 150 years. Still standing, not because they had never been damaged, because someone, at every critical moment, had chosen to restore rather than replace. "We already started," he said. "This story reaches us with 3 small, practical truths worth carrying. First, silence between 2 people who love each other is never neutral. It is always being interpreted. And in the absence of your voice, someone else's will fill the space. This week, say the thing you have been assuming the other person already knows. Say it plainly. Say it where they can hear it. Second, grief that is not shared does not shrink. It builds walls. If you are carrying something heavy and the person beside you doesn't know, that is not strength. That is architecture you didn't mean to build. Third, the people who restore are rarer and more valuable than the people who replace. Anyone can walk away from a structure that shows wear. It takes a different kind of person to see what is still sound, name what needs repair, and do the patient, unglamorous work of making it hold for another 100 years. Real love is not a feeling that maintains itself. It is a choice, repeated in the smallest and most specific details of a life shared on purpose. This story was crafted from a human heart, with gentle support from AI. Its only purpose is to remind you that sometimes the most important renovation is the one that happens between 2 people who never stopped loving each other. They just forgot to say so out loud.